So today The Boys has wrapped up its final season, season 5, and I figured I'd do something a little different. I figured I'd do a little unscripted, just kind of ramble thoughts on this latest season. Was it any good? There's been a lot of hubbub online about this newest season, so I thought, why not just do this episode by episode, scene by scene, okay, not quite scene by scene, but kind of go through each episode and kind of just go over my thoughts, some of my criticisms, but also some things I enjoyed as well, because I do think there is legitimately some good things to praise about in this season. Most notably here, of course, is Anthony Starr's performance as Homelander. He is legitimately just incredible. He has to just land some major roles after this show has finished now. I would love to see him in more movies, because especially just his expressions, what he does with his face. This scene right here also, of course, is talking about Homelander talking about the memes, and he is just so memeable because his expressions are just, oh my god, they are just insane. When the show is at its worst, it is still an enjoyable and a worthwhile watch just for him alone. It is essentially the Homelander show. That is the reason why they've kept him on as the main antagonist for so long, is because he is the show. I feel like most people who, even if they were not liking this final season, they were still enjoying Anthony Starr's performance as Homelander. He is legitimately a great part of this whole thing. But yeah, let's get into this first episode. And one major criticism that I immediately have is this opening scene right here. Starlight posing as Firecracker, fighting Black Noir, and a major thing that they are setting up here is, of course, the airplane footage that gets leaked. And this has been a thing that has been built up to for so long now. We had the airplane thing in season 1, then in season 2 they set up that they have a video of it, and if it goes up, then Homelander's image gets destroyed, everybody hate him, so that's some blackmail that they have over Homelander. And then for it to just just be exposed in this episode, and for it to not even be a big deal, it just gets quickly waved off as just being AI, which is so disappointing. And sure, it makes sense, right? We're in 2026, that is realistically what they would say, but it is just so underwhelming. And that's going to be a word that I think will come up quite frequently when we're talking about this season, is underwhelming. We then cut to the boys in this sort of essentially a concentration camp, but it's a Homelander concentration camp. And we got this recurring joke with Love Sausage, of course, being his big sausage being used as a weapon. Obviously, the boys is big on this sort of crass humor. And then in the very next scene, we see Huey. Oi. Not Huey, Butcher. Oi, Huey. Homelander's nicked me wife and killed me bloody son. Obviously, Carl Urban, same as what I said with Anthony Starr, he's also just incredible in the show. And one big disappointing thing with this season is that they didn't really live up to the ending of season 4, which set up Butcher to almost be the second big villain. That, in terms of how the last season wrapped, we were led to believe that he would be doing his own thing as a rogue villain trying to kill all the Supes, whilst the boys are doing their own thing. And in this first introduction to Butcher in this season, we see him doing something pretty evil, which is of course killing his very abusive dad, who is Scarecrow in Arkham Knight and also in the Lord of the Rings movies. I think this is a good scene to show, Butcher and how he's changed from the Butcher that we know, but it's very inconsistent in terms of how then Butcher will be later shown in the season, and it doesn't really feel like there was any point of him having his worm powers, his tentacle powers, because he's largely the same Butcher that we know in the previous seasons. The dynamic still feels very consistent. In fact, there's that meme from Family Guy where it's Peter, we're never working with you again, and there's I'm putting together teams God damn it, you son of a bitch, I'm in. And that's very much what this season of The Boys felt like in terms of Butcher and the other boys. MM's Butcher, fuck you, we're done. And then it's damn it, Butcher, I'm in. Another big talking point is Kimiko in the season, because of course here, she actually talks. And I think it was fine for this first bit actually, where we first see her talk, I think is a little fun. She imitates Butcher's oi oi, cunt cunt, which did actually get a decent chuckle out of me. But a lot of the times when she talks, it is just a little cringe, and I get what they're trying to go for, because in this scene she's talking about, I watched TikTok and yada yada yada. But I think it just gets to a point where it's a bit too much. And I still, I like Kimiko as a character, but having her talk this much and having it be just such fluff, it did not work for me for the most part. Although there is one joke later on in the season where she talks about watching porn and then she just goes, no, And that actually did work for me. But for the most part, there's this reason why there's like a meme of people being like, oh, I skip every Frenchie and Kimiko scene. And that is a big part of a problem of this season, is I do not think The Boys should have ran on for 5 seasons. It's because it's just a lot of character arcs become stagnant after a while. And I think a big example of this is how they treat Huey and Starlight and their relationship. Because at a certain point with these characters, there's just not really much to do with them. I think the same thing, honestly, with MM and Frenchie. Honestly, The Boys as a whole, there isn't really a lot for their characters to kind of go through. So they just remain in this same point. So yeah, with Huey and Starlight, there isn't really much to them this season. They feel very underused, but also there's not really much to do with them at this point, because I feel like they've already reached their character arcs, so they're just kind of there for the ride, which is very disappointing. And again, to bring it to this point with Butcher, it very much just feels like this is just the same Butcher that we knew in the first 4 seasons, which then makes that ending of season 4 even more disappointing, because he really isn't a villain in this season until like a switch at the very end, which felt very sudden and very rushed, but we'll get to that, of course, when we get to that episode. And of course, we get introduced to Soldier Boy in this shot right here, which of course, Soldier Boy's main characteristic is that he is always stuck in a little pod. He starts off the show in a pod, and he'll also end the show in a pod. But I do have another bit of praise here, is that I think Daveed Diggs is really good as O-Father. He is honestly terrific. I love him. Honestly, he's like been in a lot of good stuff. He was in Blind Spotting, which I really loved. It's a nice, good, independent movie that he's the lead role in. But honestly, like one thing I wish O-Father was kind of introduced earlier in the show. I wish he was kind of brought on in season 4 potentially, because obviously with this being the final season, they don't really have much time to set up new subplots and fully develop new characters. So he is someone who just kind of just plucked right there at the very end. But with what he does with his screen time, he is very entertaining. And he has great screen presence as well. And of course, we got my boy, A-Train. So yeah, I really liked what they did with A-Train's character this season. Of course, he doesn't do a whole lot this season because he dies in this very same episode, which actually was a big surprise to me. I thought they were going to keep him on for a lot longer, but honestly, I'm happy with how they used them. There is, of course, some criticism in terms of how they write the Supes' powers, because A-Train is pretty OP because he's a speedster, and there's not a lot of good shows or movies that can write speedsters really well. Honestly, I think probably one of the best examples I've seen is, I don't know, Megamind. Anyways, we get a conversation between Homelander and Huey, and obviously another big criticism is that there is so much plot armor in the show. It is kind of insane, because Homelander could honestly kill the boys at any point. Like, there was always a contrived reason as to why Homelander lets the boys live for as long as he does. They even mention it in the very last episode, which kind of reminds me of that Deadpool problems, like, just because you mention it doesn't make it less of a problem, because really it doesn't make any sense. Especially in this one moment in season 4 where, with what they establish at the very end of this episode, it is very inconsistent how Homelander somehow doesn't like catch up with A-Train in season 4, or like know where like A-Train has taken Huey away. It's just so much plot armor, it is so crazy. And of course, here we see Homelander with the boys, and here he lasers Kimiko in half, which I'll bring up again in the last episode, because Homelander is kind of shown to be really powerful here, and then in the last episode it's kind of, he is way nerfed. He is nerfed so hard. And also, Butcher rarely uses his tentacle powers in this season. It's kind of honestly weird how they even gave him powers in the first place, because what is the point? He barely uses them. If honestly they didn't even have that season 4 finale and they just didn't have Butcher have powers at all, not much would have changed about this season. But let's talk about the very end of this episode where A-Train comes in to save the day. Here they do very much a X-Men Days of Future Past sort of Quicksilver type scene where he comes in, everything's in super slow motion, but he's able to go in at normal speed, save MM over here. But it's just the thing that, of course, A-Train is so OP because of his powers that then, in order for Homelander to be a threat to A-Train, they do something that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, which is to have Homelander be essentially a speedster as well, which was never really shown in the live-action show, except for like an episode of the animated Diabolical series. Which, like, fair, I guess that episode is canon, or at least that part of that episode, because I never actually watched Diabolical, but I saw the clips. But like, one thing that's kind of unclear to me is that, does Homelander have the same speedster perception perception as A-Train, because he's able to like catch up to A-Train here in this little chase. It's never really clearly established if he does, unless we count the diabolical episode, then I guess he does have that kind of speedster perception. But one thing I don't really buy is like, first of all, why is this the first time that we're ever actually seeing Homelander use this ability of being super fast? I didn't even know he could do that in the show. But what I do like is that they do like, you know, finish setting up this season 1 sort of payoff to A-Train's arc, where of course we see him kill Robin in the very first episode, and then in season 3 we kind of see him start to make the change to be a better person when he kills, who's that racist dude, Hawk something, who then like crippled his brother. He's almost about to crash into this person and then avoids it. But also like, if dude has like super perception, I don't think he should have realistically tripped like this and died. So, but I get it, right? Like, I think ultimately, because I know a lot of people talk about power scaling, which I get is very geeky to talk about, and this kind of can be some fun to have in it, but I understand in terms of you want something that works for the narrative, you want something to feel emotionally satisfying, and I think honestly, if we ignore some of the power scaling kind of talks, I think this is a satisfying end to A-Train's arc. I like his final conversation with Homelander here, where he basically just laughs in his face, and obviously this conversation clearly affects Homelander, as you can see in his face, where he says like, what are you about the powers? You're nothing, you know, like what was I even afraid of? And this is a really good scene, and honestly I think it was a good death for A-Train to have, so honestly I'm very happy with this episode, and it's no wonder that this is the highest rated episode of this season. Like if you look at IMDb, it is the top rated of the season and 8.9 out of 10, which makes sense to me. I think it has a great ending, which leaves a good impact and also kind of establishes the stakes. Like, okay, this is the final season. We are killing off characters, and starting off the season with A-Train's death, I think was a really smart decision, because obviously it's kind of the exact opposite of Stranger Things Season 5, where they didn't kill any characters off except for some very minor and unimportant characters, and then when they did have a character die in the last episode, it's left ambiguous so that if you wanted to, they could come back, and who knows, they might do some future spin-offs. But yeah, in terms of episode 1, I think this is a pretty solid start. In terms of what I'd rate this, I've not rated it yet. I'm thinking I might give this a 7. I still have some crinks. I still have some problems with how they handle the whole AI sort of, you know, airplane footage. That was very underwhelming, but overall it was solid. Yeah, I'd give this a 7, so I'd rate that a 7. So episode 2, of course, we got this whole virus thing coming back, which was introduced at the end of Gen V season 1, and then of course became a big part of season 4 of The Boys, and is now being, you know, brought back into this season of, you know, of course, The Boys. Yeah, no, this is, I really do not understand why the virus was such a big deal for these 2 seasons, and why it was also being set up so hard in Gen V. In fact, Gen V in total was kind of just a waste of time, but we'll talk about that later with the Gen V characters. But yeah, of course, we have Newman's husband here making the virus. Yeah, this honestly just feels like this season does waste a lot of time on this virus subplot, which in the end is not important really at all. It just feels like a diversion, but of course we'll talk more about the virus later when it becomes more relevant to talk about Homelander. This is also, you know, a pretty enjoyable scene because of course it's Anthony Starr's Homelander, but also, to repeat my sentiment, we did kind of already get a scene like this in the last season where A-Train betrays Homelander, and it's like, A-Train? How could A-Train betray me? And this is just another scene kind of showing off his delusions. Again, honestly, this scene could have been deleted and nothing really would have changed. But I don't want to be all negative, because one thing I actually do like about the second episode is Rockhard, who is sort of this parody of the Thing from Fantastic Four. And of course, as you can see, his body is just like the Thing, is made out of all rock. I kind of like the tease of like, okay, how is The Boys going to like adapt like a character like Rockhard, who of course, like the budget, are they going to go practical? Are they going to go CGI? He is just this big lump of rock here who cannot move, and he's a gooner. He is gooning. He's watching volcano porn and shoots lava, and I guess his lava is the reason why there's like so many rocks kind of like, I don't know, like forming around him. It's a really cool practical effect actually when later his head blows up, and seeing the behind the scenes videos of like how it looked, and you can actually see it's a real practical thing. That's actually kind of just what I love about this, is that they didn't just resort to just using a CGI monster creature sort of effect. They did this practically, which I always love to see. Also, this kind of felt like a good old classic boy scenario where the boys have to figure out, okay, how do we kill a soup? And essentially they're trying to get him to breathe in this virus, but of course Rockhard can hold his breath for hours, and there's that risk of like, okay, these other soups are going to come back in here, we need to figure out a way to get the virus into his body. And that's what I really loved about the very first season of The Boys, is the boys facing these insurmountable odds about, okay, how do we actually kill these beings with superpowers like translucent and whatnot? And when they actually do end up achieving it, it does feel like a huge monumental task has been achieved. So yeah, this episode, I don't think it is as good as episode 1, but I did kind of like the kind of going back to basics almost, which was kind of refreshing to see because the show had not been like that in so long, ever since like season 3, honestly, when the boys got superpowers as well, although I did like how that was used in season 3, but yeah, since then, it's kind of course escalated into this whole other thing. It feels really weird how we don't actually ever have a scene with Soldier Boy interacting with Black Noir 2, which I don't know if that was left on the cutting room floor or anything, but it seems like you'd have at least an acknowledgement from him. Because obviously it's not the Black Noir that he knows, but still you'd expect some kind of reaction out of seeing someone who, you know, he hates, and then seeing someone wear that same costume. It feels weird. This part I really liked a lot, seeing Bashley, the back of Ashley's head, which is, I think, a really interesting, kind of funny payoff to what happened at the end of season 4. It's like, okay, what powers is Ashley gonna get? And she gets this freaky looking head that can read other people's minds. Yeah, I don't have too much to say about this. It's very freaky. I kind of liked it. At first they're doing this thing where there's like this voiceover that we can hear in Ashley's head, and you're thinking, okay, it's just like her internal monologue, her thoughts. Okay, that's weird. We don't really see the boys doing that before. And then the reveal is like, oh, it's actually this other character that's on the back of her head. I thought, yeah, it definitely surprised me for sure. We get kind of more repetitive scenes of like Frenchie and Kimiko. They constantly talk about how, oh, you know, we want to like have a nice future, we want to get away from all this, kind of telegraphing that one of these people is gonna die. Yes, it felt pretty sloppy, and ultimately what they do with Frenchie and Kimiko I do find pretty cheesy, but we'll get into that when we talk about the finale. And of course, episode 2 ends with Soldier Boy coming back from the dead because the virus did not work, because he has V1. And this is going to be where I get into the big criticism about the virus and the V1. Because honestly, what is the point of having this virus here if V1 makes you immune to the virus? So then this season just becomes like this fetch quest of getting the V1 for Homelander. And then once Homelander gets the V1, we're basically back at point 0 or point 1 or whatever, where now Homelander is back to being the strongest soup in the world. But if you never introduced the virus plot to begin with, nothing would have changed about how this season ultimately goes. They would still need to depower him like that Soldier Boy blast. So this virus is just a big time waste. Episode 3, we start out with Ryan killing the soldiers. That is, you know, it's a sequence. And then Soldier Boy is back to being, in terms of the public, oh, he's no longer like this Russian crazy, radicalized by the Russians. He's actually a true patriot all along. So that happens, and Homelander reveals that Soldier Boy is his father. So those are the big kind of stuff that happens at the start of this episode. And oh boy, Sister Sage. The writing for this character, I just never really liked this character, honestly, because with a character like Sister Sage, when you have to write somebody who is meant to be the smartest character in this universe, you kind of need to actually have good writing to back that up. And it makes me think, like, when you watch Breaking Bad, you never doubt that Walter White is as smart as he is. He feels like a really smart guy. Whereas in the show, it never really felt like Sister Sage was actually smart. It felt like the writers were trying to make you think that Sister Sage is so smart, but plot conveniences and whatnot make her just come across as just being like, come on, how could you not have predicted that? And we fall into a lot of tropes near the end of this season. I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but ultimately, like in episode 6, where Soldier Boy gives Homelander the V1, it is... I'll talk about it more when we talk about that episode. But yeah, man, I'm honestly not a fan of how much they use Soldier Boy in this season. Why does he feel like he's more of a main character than Huey? Or any of the boys, for that matter? again, it's like they are teasing Vault Rising so hard. Like whenever Clara's name gets mentioned, it's like they always like linger on Soldier Boy's reactions, like, ooh, there's some history there. Who was Stormfront? It's Clara. And it's just like, why does it feel like I'm watching the Vault Rising sequel instead of the last season of The Boys? Which honestly, like, come on, at least get this ending right first before you start, like, trying to promote this other show. Like, imagine if the last season of Breaking Bad was trying to promote Better Call Saul, and they're including all this, like, dialogue about, like, oh, Jimmy, or Saul, do you remember Kim? And, you know, having it linger on, like, Saul Goodman's face. It's like, it just would have been so distracting, and that's how it feels when it's done here. And speaking of Breaking Bad, of course, we got Giancarlo Esposito, who I feel like is always typecast to play the same bad guy, like in Mandalorian, and what else has he been in? Oh yeah, Far Cry. He's always that same type of villain, which has got to be, you know, I mean, look, at least he's getting his bag, right? He's getting his money, so, you know, you do you. We also spent some time on Translucent Sun. Again, I don't know, like, why are we spending time on this? Now that the season is over, this kind of just felt like, I don't know, we're padding, you know, just to add something. I do like this dynamic between Butcher and Ryan, and how the show illustrates Butcher is not a good guy just because he is against Homelander. It doesn't mean that he is a particularly good person, because with his reactions with Ryan, you can see how he is really using him here. Especially when they go to the pub afterwards, and Butcher's like, okay, I want you to be the one who administers the virus to Homelander, killing them both. And you're like, damn, Butcher, he is kind of the villain. Like, when I was watching this episode, I felt like, damn, he is kind of the villain this season. But after this, I feel like they kind of tame or neuter Butcher kind of so much, where I just felt like it's still the same Butcher from like season 2, season 3 and whatnot. He doesn't feel too evil, which then makes the finale feel a bit more rushed. But again, we're gonna get to that. And episode 3 ends with this fight between Homelander and Ryan. And yeah, this is where you can definitely feel the budget, because all of the big fights take place in one room. And it's kind of crazy when you have these two people who are meant to be like kind of the Superman equivalent, right? And yet when they fight, it just feels like two ordinary people fighting. This fight, like, honestly, maybe would have felt more impactful if, like, Ryan died or something, but he just kind of just beats Ryan up in a very Invincible light type of, you know, scenario where, you know, the dad beats on the son. I don't know, when you watched it in the trailer, like, oh, Homelander's doing something, like, pretty serious here, I felt like, is Ryan actually gonna die? And I don't know, maybe if he did die, that would have been kind of like, it would have been something, but this is just kind of the thing that happens this season. It doesn't really feel like, because we already know Homelander's an evil dude, like, seeing him beat on his son doesn't really make me feel any type of way. It's just like, oh, it's just Homelander being Homelander, but hey, it does look good in the trailer, at least. Alright, episode 4, I'm just going to say straight up, this is probably the worst episode of this season, because it is the one that feels like the biggest waste of time, and also has some pretty weak writing in terms of how Homelander and Soldier Boy are written, and their whole dynamic together. I'm really not a fan of them teaming up, Soldier Boy and Homelander, so much this season, and how flip-floppy Soldier Boy is in his motivations, and that really becomes especially apparent in episode 6. But yeah, the episode starts off with Homelander telling Firecracker that he is God, which of course we got in that Madeline little dream on the last episode, where he, you know, visions himself like, oh, I am God, this is my destiny. And then Ryan disappears for essentially most of the season. So what happens is the boys are like, okay, we need to find V1, so let's go to this little warehouse or whatever in this deserted location to find what we can of the V1 to stop Homelander from getting it, and also potentially create a immunity for Starlight and Kimiko. Starlight visits her dad and his family here. Ooh, we got Superman, a voice actor from the animated series, which is like, I recognize that voice, and then I looked up who it was, it's like, ah, that's who that is. So there's a thing in this episode where there is something that's causing everyone to be super, like, violent and mean to each other, and they start fighting and almost killing each other, which very much felt like a typical, I don't know, Saturday morning cartoon type of, like, filler episode. Also, this is just really weird because at the end of this episode, it's like, you guys almost just killed each other, like MM and Huey, and you said all that shit. They just continue going as they do. Yeah. Also, MM gets like shot, if I'm not mistaken. He's just like fine. It doesn't bother him at all, which again kind of speaks to the plot armor and how crazy, like, none of these characters can really die, except for, of course, when you get to the penultimate episode. But yeah. Oh, and also this kid has a chromacopia like hoodie, even though Tyler the Creator is meant to be like in a vault prison camp. You could say that maybe that's intentional, which I could see that argument being made. But yeah, I just thought it was interesting to point out regardless, because he's meant to be like a big Homelander stan. I thought this was kind of a nice moment, you know, kind of showing the humanity in the boys, because the boys can often be very cynical, very edgy. So it's nice when you have a moment where it doesn't end in a complete bloodbath and people die. It is actually kind of refreshing in a show like this. Then we get this kind of weird scene where Soldier Boy traps Homelander. I don't know if he's trying to kill him or just kind of just annoy him or whatever. But yeah, he trapped him here. It's clearly that their, you know, relationship is not very good. But for whatever reason, Soldier Boy keeps flip-flopping. So, you know, we have that to look forward to. And again, this bit with Soldier Boy talking to this guy who we have no idea who he is. I guess we'll find out in Vault Rising, because then Soldier Boy gets like emotionally teared up, is like, oh my god, I'm so sorry, you know, that I killed you. And I'm like, who is this guy? Why do we care? It's, again, the writing is so annoying here, because maybe like Soldier Boy's motivations make more sense if we have the context of Vault Rising, but then why are you writing your show in that way, where we need a future spin-off show to hopefully make something make more sense in this final season? It is so bizarre to me. And also on the point, because Clara was mentioned in this episode, and Soldier Boy later says, I loved her more than anything. And keep in mind, Stormfront, who used to go by the name Liberty, was actually referenced in season 3 of The Boys, and his only mention of Liberty was, damn, she was a good plow, she was a good fuck. And that's all we get in season 3, but suddenly in season 5 that all goes away and he's all serious, he's all misty-eyed. And the reason for that being is because obviously they were not thinking about Vault Rising when they were making season 3 of The Boys. I think Soldier Boy is just meant to be like this one-off character in this one season, but obviously he was so popular that they then left that window open by having him in that cryopod, and they brought him back in season 5, and he ultimately just feels very unimportant in this season. He's just kind of there, and his character, he's a fraud. He is an ultimate fraud in this season. So yeah, Soldier Boy's all sad and Homelander's like, okay then, I guess I won't fight you or kill you or whatever. So yeah, there's that. Okay, now we get on to episode 5 of The Boys. This one is a pretty interesting episode because it's titled One Shots, and essentially we have a different structure than we do in the other episodes, where we kind of focus on each individual member of the 7, where we have, at first we start with Firecracker, we find out a bit about her background, her preacher who she meets up with, and we find out about her conflict in her faith, her religion, and of course, you know, following Homelander, with Homelander declaring himself as God and outlawing other kind of religions. I actually thought this was really interesting, and it was good, needed development for Firecracker's character. I kind of disagree with the complaint that people say that this episode was filler, and I actually quite like this episode quite a bit. So I guess your mileage may vary, but this honestly did work very well for me. I think the Firecracker part is probably the strongest part of this episode. It kind of, it opens on Firecracker and of course ends with Firecracker. And yeah, Valerie Curry, her performance is exceptional in this part, where she makes up this lie to kind of take down her former Florida preacher, and it was really just great stuff. I am a fan of all the Firecracker stuff in this episode. But then we get to Black Noir, and in retrospect, whilst watching this, I thought this was fun. It was nice to actually find out more about Black Noir 2 as a character, but in retrospect, this does feel like kind of wasted time. It really felt like with the boys in this season, there are a lot of character deaths, a lot of, well, deaths of the 7, and it kind of felt like they didn't really have much purpose. Aside from Firecracker, I would say Black Noir, of course, spoiler alert, he dies in, is it the very next episode? But yeah, with Black Noir, it kind of felt like, okay, we have this character who we kind of built up in the last season. He is the new Black Noir, he's the replacement. What do we do with him? We can't really leave him alive, so I guess we'll just kill him off in the next episode. And that was very disappointing, especially after this bit, kind of finding out more about him. And this is a bit comedic as well, with this director character who we've seen in the previous seasons. It's basically the point of this is it's showing off his beef with the Deep and them trying to one-up each other in this little battle, and how it culminates in the next episode, which we'll talk about. But yeah, in terms of the Black Noir bit, it's fine. I don't know, this, in terms of the filler argument, in retrospect, this is pretty much, it does kind of feel like filler. It's just kind of there to add padding to the season. To me, I feel like when they were writing the season, they had a kind of finished goal that they knew they were going to reach. They knew what they wanted to do in that very last episode. So then for the rest of the season, it kind of felt like, okay, let's kind of meander a bit and mess around with these characters with an episode structure like this, you know, before we can reach that final point. We then get this part, the terror part, which of course you see this dream with Homelander was like, you wanna fuck me like a good boy, which a lot of people have criticized. They said, okay, what was the point of having this scene in the final season? I'm going to push back against that a little bit, because The Boys from the very beginning has been a satirical show with comedy in there, and of course shock value moments like this. This is very typical of The Boys, and I think that if you are a fan of this show, I don't know why you'd have much problem with this scene in particular, because even though it is the final season, it doesn't mean we can't have moments of just like weird shock value moments, because that's kind of what The Boys, that's their entire brand, is to kind of, you know, gross out moments, weird moments, shock moments. And honestly, I thought this was fun. Like, I didn't mind it. And terror part, like the whole terror part, I don't think this was wasted time, because it does show us the side of The Boys where we're kind of developing more the kind of conflict or relationship, I should say, between Huey and Butcher. And that's of course very important setup for the final episode. You know, we see it of course from Terror's perspective, but yeah, this part is still like is crucial to the story, right? It's kind of setting up, okay, there's still humanity in Butcher with his dog Terror, because he really does love his dog Terror. And then towards the end he's like, all right, Huey, you know, if we gotta find, you know, we can possibly find a cure, we'll do it, or whatever, you know, whatever he says towards the end. I'm just imagining near the end when Butcher is about to kill Homelander, and then it's like, wait, no, that's not what Terror would have wanted. Then we cut to Soldier Boy. We get his perspective, and yeah, again, the writing for Soldier Boy is very weird this season. The way he just flip-flops between sides, because at first he's like talking about Homelander, you're a fucking weirdo. And then in this episode, he has an opportunity where he's actually able to kill off, oh look, Seth Rogen cameo. He's able to kill off Homelander, right? He is incapacitated. He tried to kill Homelander, or at least very seriously damage him, in episode 4, the very last episode. And then here he's, you know, oh yeah, Supernatural reunion, by the way, if you're a Supernatural fan. But yeah, for some reason he's just like, you know what, no, he's my son, and only I get to fuck him. And I just did not buy it, especially considering the ending of season 3, where Soldier Boy was all prepared to kill Homelander there and then, and he just, now he's just like, he's getting cold feet. That's basically what's happening, and it's because like the writers, they don't know what to do with him. Who knows, maybe this makes more sense with the context of Vought Rising, because like, you know, in the last episode, he does kill like a sort of person he was, I guess, somewhat close with or had some kind of relationship with, right? Because he cries and he's sad about his death. So maybe if you had the context of Vought Rising and you saw that relationship there, and now that that's gone, maybe you could make the argument that like Soldier Boy is now lacking any close relationships he has in his life. And with Homelander, that's his real only relationship that he has now. So maybe you could make that argument, but it is really weak because we don't know like the context of Soldier Boy as a character really, because now there's all this backstory that's going to be revealed in a prequel show. So now as an audience member, you're kind of just left confused by Soldier Boy's actions. But yeah, anyways, I've babbled on long enough about my Soldier Boy grievances. We do get a Kumail Nanjiani cameo. My goat, Kumail! So yeah, you know, I'll admit the celebrity cameos here, they're fun. I didn't mind them. I wonder how they're going to be voicing Alan though in Invincible now that Seth Rogen has passed on. Rest in peace. The final bit on Firecracker's sort of arc here where, and they show it right here, where she throws a Jesus little statue, you know, in the bin. She's rejecting her religion to embrace Homelander, and of course that kind of bites her in the back, where she kind of pushes Homelander. It's like, oh, I love you, you know, doesn't anyone need love? And then Home's like, nah, and then kills her. But yeah, I felt like the firecracker stuff is easily the best part of this episode. The other stuff is kind of like take it or leave it. This Soldier Boy part is, I mean, it's fun cameos, but very weird writing in Soldier Boy. Then we get to episode 6, which is obviously a pretty big turning point in the series. This is where Homelander finally gets the V1. Again, as I've mentioned, it just doesn't really make anything feel different. All it means is that we can't use the virus on him. And it's like, why even bring the virus into this plot in the first place? The virus was useless. But yeah, we got this guy, the legend. He's a lot of fun. I like him. I think the actor does a great job. Oh my god, look at this. This is horrifying. The deep popcorn bucket. Someone has definitely, put their you-know-what into that mouth. Oh, we also got like a Nicole Kidman parody here. Again, that deep popcorn bucket. Cursed. Actually, speaking of Firecracker, one thing that is a little disappointing is how once she's dead, it only gets brought up, really, by Homelander one time when he's talking to the Deep, and then Starlight and Huey find her body, but we never really find out, like, we don't really see, like, the public ever react to it, or, because, like, even with A-Train, we got, like, a memorial service for him, but there's nothing really like that for Firecracker, and that felt a bit weird to me. It made it feel like, okay, we really don't even have time to, like, have something like that for Firecracker, because she's a pretty important character, so that was a bit disappointing. So here we get Sister Sage drugging Ashley, knocking her out, so that Bashley, I guess they were calling her the back of Ashley, Bashley, can read Soldier Boy's mind, and that is when she tells her that Soldier Boy is actually kind of proud of Homelander and feels conflicted, which makes a decision later on very perplexing as to why Sister Sage does this, and I know we'll get onto it later, but yeah, for now we get some more. Honestly, this episode is the worst when it comes to feeling like a Vault Rising sequel to a show that doesn't exist yet, because it's introducing Bombsai, it's introducing Geisha. Again, it's just like, what are we doing here? This is the final season of The Boys. Can't we just get this ending right first before we start promoting other spin-offs and other shows? It is just so bizarre. And that's what it is, petroleum. And of course the Black Noir sees that. He commits fish genocide, which honestly is more damage than anything that Homelander did this whole season. Kinda crazy. Yeah, we got this scene. This can pretty much skip. There's like nothing to really say about this scene. Oh yeah, so they have this to kind of have like Sister Sage try to pit these two against each other, which again, I'm repeating myself here. But yeah, at this point, Soldier Boy's like, fuck you, son. Well, he doesn't actually call him son at this point. He's like, you weirdo, whatever. And then the next time they see each other in this episode, he's like, you know what? It's what Clara would have wanted. Just completely switching up. Like, that is crazy. Alright, this is a pretty big moment in this episode. It's where Black Noir dies. And this did not work for me. Again, as I was saying, it felt like they were just cleaning house. They're like, okay, it's our last season. Let's just kill these characters off so that we don't have to, like, deal with them. But my question is, like, how the hell does the Deep kill Black Noir here? First of all, strangling him with a cord. This man is bulletproof. He is a soup. How does that cord not just, like, break when you try to strangle a soup with it? This should not work. It does not make sense. And then to top it all off, what happens is we then get a knife that penetrates Black Noir's skull. Yeah, it's like right here. My God, this man is bulletproof. How is a knife penetrating him? What is that knife made of? Is it vibranium? This is just so weird. Also, not to even mention, he can fly. Black Noir can fly. Why doesn't he try flying at this very moment? Why is he letting this happen to him? It is just so weak. There's no defending this. It's just a shock value death. And yeah, it just is bad. It is bad. And it also doesn't matter. They just ignore this. Like, the Deep just tells Homelander, oh, he was, like, talking bad about you, that's why I had to kill him. And Homelander doesn't care, because, I mean, why would Homelander care? He thinks he's God and everything. But we don't, again, same thing with Firecracker. We don't see any other reactions to Black Noir's death. This is just a thing that happens. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention Sister Sage joins up with the boys. And, she's about to do something very dumb in this episode. We get a scene with the Legend and Homelander, and this is actually a really good scene. Maybe the best scene in this episode. So, yeah, I kind of liked how the Legend was talking to Homelander here. Kind of just talking to him like just any other talent, and that's why Homelander ultimately lets him live. I didn't have a problem with this. I thought this worked really well. Alright, we got Bombsite here. Well, actually, you know what? I'll say this. Even though he doesn't have a lot of screen time in this episode. I do kind of like him. I like what we saw of him. I'd be interested in seeing more of him in Vault Rising. Does he need to be in this show? No. It'd be probably been better if he wasn't in the show. It's just more unnecessary stuff to introduce this season. And also, why is this man telling Soldier Boy, oh, you know, I've always been jealous of that pretty face of yours. Like, man, look at yourself, bro. You're handsome. Anyways, it is kind of also crazy that Bombsight is giving the boys more trouble than Homelander does in his final battle with Butcher. That is odd to me. Is Bombsight meant to be, like, more powerful than Homelander? Who knows? Who cares? We're about to get to the infamous moment where Soldier Boy is like, this is what Clara would have wanted. Again, I feel like you already know why this scene is so stupid. It just feels like it betrays everything that, you know, Soldier Boy is really about as a character. It does not make sense with the character that we saw in Season 3. And it would only work if we got more of the context in Vault Rising, I suppose. It's terrible. Enough said. They show that Homelander has like a big power-up here. Oh, look, he's super powerful. Look at these lasers. And this is really the only time when he gets the V1 where it actually looks like he has had a power-up, because in the next 2 episodes, he just does what Homelander can normally do. He doesn't seem any more powerful, which is like, that's what I'm thinking. Was there a budget issue this season? Did they intend to do more? And of course, people have been talking about the marketing of this season, especially these 2 posters, right? Mainly this one where Homelander's up in space and there's destruction on planet Earth. And it's like, oh, they're kind of teasing Homelander's going to go crazy this season. He's going to finally go mass destruction, kind of fulfilling on that dream imaginary sequence in season 2 where Homelander just kills a crowd in public, which I think some people, like a lot of people, are like really harping up on that point. It's like, why didn't Homelander like destroy city or something? I think some people wanted like Man of Steel level destruction with Homelander, and I knew we were never going to get like Man of Steel, but like with Homelander, because the show was never that kind of show, and also I would ever have like the budget for that realistically. But at least something where he kills a crowd of civilians somewhere, or like, I don't know, see a building get destroyed instead of every fight scene being in one room that barely gets damaged. I really felt like there was a budget issue. Like, why couldn't they at least achieve what they achieved in the season 2 dream sequence? Like, if they just did that season 2 dream sequence, but actually in like the real world here, I wouldn't have minded something more small scale like that, rather than having to have like Homelander cause absolute destruction everywhere like he's Superman fighting Zod. And there's no wonder why there's a bunch of fan videos out now of like, oh, this is this whole scorched earth idea, and some of those videos are actually pretty well done. Alright, and then we got episode 7, which of course starts out with a song and dance number with Oh Father. It's a solid song and dance number. And then of course we have Homelander in the White House, which I'll be honest, I honestly thought when they released the teaser for this episode, I thought the episode was going to just end with Homelander in the White House, but no, it actually starts off with him with his feet up, kind of showing he's basically the president. He ends up killing the president as well in the scene in a pretty standard Homelander type death. Like whenever Homelander has his hands on someone, you know he's just going to kill them. So there's really no surprise there. Oh, and of course here we get the Gen V characters. This is the first time they've shown up this season, which again makes Gen V season 2 feel like a waste of time because they do nothing. They don't even use their superpowers in this season. And yeah, it's crazy because in this scene as well, we have MM being like, aren't you meant to be like Homelander levels of powerful? And then Marie Moreau's just like, that has been greatly exaggerated. And I'm just like, what? Maybe they're thinking like, oh, you know, we don't want people who have not seen Gen V to feel kind of lost or feel like they need to watch Gen V for the boys. But then it's like, what was even the point of the season 2 plotline of building up Marie as someone who can take on Homelander if she doesn't even have a single scene with Homelander, doesn't even fight anyone, doesn't even do anything? It's crazy. It's honestly, it's mental. It's just a lot of wasted potential, and it's a shame because I actually genuinely did like the first season of Gen V, and I would have liked to see them be integrated more into the season and have that crossover feel more natural. But here it just feels like they're just background characters. They don't do anything, and it makes your investment in that spin-off show kind of feel like it was worthless, mostly for season 2, because that really felt like it was just set up for season 5 of the boys. Oh, you know, we thought it was going to be when they join the resistance team, but then it, you know, they don't do anything. They just get mentioned in a few offhand offhanded lines of dialogue, and yeah, they're just there. Oh yeah, also as well, they try to make Kimiko into Soldier Boy 2.0, which again is crazy that they're introducing this in the second to last episode. It does make it feel pretty rushed, because now they're like, oh, we can't use the virus. Alright, let's just go back to what we were going to do in season 3, which makes me think, why couldn't season 3 just be the last season with Homelander, just rework that, because they were going to do the Soldier Boy blast to depower Homelander. They didn't do that in season 3, and now in season 5, we're just going back to using the Soldier Boy blast. Again, it just feels like a lot of padding to get to that end point of having Homelander be depowered. Yeah, we just wasted a lot of time with this virus subplot, which ended up not being useful at all. This was a fun scene actually, with the Deep and the Samuel L. Jackson cameo. I enjoyed this. It's of course a lot of fun. They always get some really interesting cameo voices whenever it's like sea creatures. Like we had Patton Oswalt in season 2, and season 4 was Tilda Swinton. So this is of course establishing that the Deep can no longer go in water. He's rejected by Homelander. The Seven is disbanded, and the Seawater Life, they reject him as well. He belongs to no one, and I thought that was a very satisfying development for the Deep's arc. And of course, when you see this scene and they say you cannot step foot in water, you pretty much know it's telegraphing how he's going to die in the next episode. And ultimately, I was satisfied with his death. This was funny. We got a little ad here of Homelander and the whole, you know, him being God. Honestly, if they wanted to convince people that Homelander was God, maybe finish the effects first before you screen it. That might have maybe helped convince people more. But yeah, essentially, these people are gonna get, you know, killed before Starlight steps in. But the big part I just want to talk about is Homelander wanting to build an amusement park ride, like a Disneyland World, but it's called Homeland. And he's showing Soldier Boy this. And this is where Soldier Boy's like, look, I just want to go, you know, do coke and fuck hookers and whatever, and, you know, all that jazz. And this is what annoys me, is that Homelander, or I should say Soldier Boy, gets taken out from the behind, from the back. And this is exactly the same thing that happened with Black Noir. He gets strangled from behind, and also Soldier Boy just gets choked out. And it's like, come on, guys. Do you never expect to be attacked from your back? Anthony Starr is really great. He, like, his face. Oh my god, the emotions. It's incredible. But yeah, like, come on, guys. You didn't see this coming? So yeah, he just gets choked out and gets put back into that pod. So this is the third time that Soldier Boy has been in that pod. I guess he's going to escape at the end of Vault Rising, whatever. I imagine they'll probably do a Better Call Saul type of structure, where parts of it are like, it, you know, starts in the future post Boys season 5, and then flashbacks as it's going through Soldier Boy's memories perhaps, and then maybe at the end or the start of Vault Rising he escapes the pod. Who knows? It could go any number of ways. But yeah, that's the end of Soldier Boy that we see in this season. I thought this was a well acted scene with MM here talking about the origin of his name, which we finally find out in season 5, so that's cool. But yeah, this is actually a pretty good moment from him, because the rest of the season he being kind of cynical, kind of like hard. Of course we have a moment of softness from him in episode 2, where he lets that Raven girl kind of, you know, go free, and here he kind of just like, look, we're gonna like save people, take care of them. So I thought that was a nice moment. This part had been criticized because it's like, okay, we're in the second to last episode, the penultimate episode of The Boys, why we got some like gross out humor with Sheen and this guy from season 2 of Gen V. I understand The Boys, again, their brand is shock value and humor like this, but this is the penultimate episode. Maybe let's get a little bit more serious. Why are we spending time on this? There he is, back in the pod. And I guess he stripped him down to his undies as well. Maybe it's more comfortable, I guess. And yet again, we get another action scene that takes place in one room. Nothing extraordinary there. Hey look, it's the Gen V characters again. They're going to stay on this farm and they're not going to be involved in the Homelander battle at all. Because that's fun. You know, we like to see that. But yeah, the big thing that this episode ends on is Frenchie's death as he tries to save Kimiko and Sister Sage. And it's, again, the way they write the powers is pretty inconsistent here, because Homelander has some crazy amount of speed. Like, of course, you know, you can't see through zinc, we know that. But when Frenchie kind of taps on the thing, he just immediately just like pops in. And I like it. I like this part. I think it's very well done. But again, where is this kind of speed? Like, after this, like, he should have really used that kind of speed in the final battle in the next episode when his life depended on it. Ah, there it is. Doo-doo. And boom! Bro really could have used that speed in that fight with Butcher and Kimiko and Ryan. Anyways, Frenchie dies, and you know, I will praise this show for actually not being afraid to kill off its core characters, unlike, you know, Stranger Things, so that is good. I do think the death is a little bit awkwardly done. I don't know if there was like a cutscene where we actually like see Homelander actually kill Frenchie, because it kind of just cuts from this moment, and then suddenly there's like all this blood out here. And I'm kind of confused, like, okay, how did Homelander actually kill Frenchie? Like, why am I thinking, oh, how did Homelander kill Frenchie, instead of actually being like, oh my god, Frenchie, he's dying. It just seems like it's very weirdly executed, and they really shouldn't have cut if they did have a scene of him actually like doing something, because like you can see he's bleeding from his like stomach, because last we see he's in that radiation chamber, but he doesn't have any like radiation scars on his face, so obviously the radiation didn't kill him. Homelander, I guess, did something, maybe fingered him. Did he finger Frenchie? But I think the performance, of course, is pretty excellent here, especially from Kimiko. Alright, then we get to the last episode. So we got a little eulogy for Frenchie, and we got, of course, oh yeah, Kimiko now has Soldier Boy powers, and she depowered Sister Sage. We then see Ryan, he's back! Because he was in 2 episodes, then he dipped, and now the show's like, oh wait, yeah, we remember Ryan exists, so he's here. He has a little scene with Homelander, which I think was actually a good scene. It was satisfying just seeing Ryan being like, just fuck off. Like, that's always satisfying whenever anyone tells Homelander to fuck off. I think, yeah, I like that scene, that worked for me. Oh yeah, more Gen V characters we got, and Starlight's just like, no, we don't want you guys to come with us to the White House to actually fight Homelander, even though, especially Marie, you'd be super helpful. Oh my goodness, no, just stay here in the farm to like help protect these people or whatever. It's just such a lame excuse. It feels very weak, and I just don't understand the thinking of like, why even have these characters even here? You might as well just not have them in the show at all if you're going to treat them like this. Again, I'm not going to harp on too much about the use of the Gen V characters. It is a lot of wasted potential, and it just makes me mad. This is probably the worst part of this episode, is how they treated these Gen V characters, and it stings even more knowing that season 3 isn't going to come out. So the last that we have is season 2, which was a letdown, and this inclusion of them in this final season of The Boys. Whatever, I guess we have Vault Rising to look forward to, however that turns out. But yeah, this is just really disappointing. Oh yeah, of course, we got this ball gag, this titanium ball gag, which I don't know if Ashley was like trying to kill her husband here, because when we see how it's used later on, you know, he gets the Doctor Strange multiverse in madness sort of treatment with Black Ball. Oh yeah, and then we get Elon Musk there in the background, or you know, an Elon Musk type, you know, he's like an astronaut, they say, and he's super rich, he's part of the ruling class. And then Homelander kills him by, well, what he says is he throws him into space, although I personally believe that he just kind of like flew up a little bit and then just like threw him up towards the sky. I don't think he actually went to space. We never actually seen Homelander in space, aside from that one poster, which was false advertising, because I don't think Homelander can breathe in space. Maybe it's like an invincible thing, maybe he needs to hold his breath, or maybe he just cannot survive in space. Anyways, I don't believe Homelander when he says he brought him to space. I think he just kind of flew as high as he could and then just threw him. Yeah, the reason I'm pointing this out is because look how fast my boy is. Oh my god. He is super fast. Again, where was this speed in the last episode, or this episode in this final battle? Because that would have been useful if he was this fast when flying, when his life depended on it. But I don't know, maybe he was tired, you know, who knows. I like this part. I like Homelander kind of talking to everyone as it's Easter. I felt like, again, Anthony Starr, like any scene that he's in, his performance, it's gold. It's good. Ashley saves the boys. Then we get, basically this is where we're cleaning house, we're killing off characters like the Deep, characters like Oh Father, because they need to go. One thing I want to talk about though is why the hell does Starlight bring the Deep into a beach next to ocean? Because Starlight doesn't know that the ocean is basically rejected Deep. Obviously we as the audience know that, but like if you were Starlight, the ocean is the Deep's best friend here. You know, that's his power. He's most powerful when he has the ocean, when he has sea life with him. So why would you actively bring him to a place where you think that would make him more powerful? Like, did you do this by accident? Yeah, the fight, honestly the fights in general in this episode, they're okay. They're not anything like grand. I think, again, I guess they didn't have the budget to really go bigger. They're just kind of just like whatever, meh kind of fights. But you know, it's satisfying seeing the Deep get killed. And I like this line delivery where he's just like, no! When Starlight asks him to like take accountability, I should say, for anything that he's done, and he's just like, no. That's a really good reaction. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised that gets turned into a gif or like a meme or something. Oh yeah, Oh Father dies as well by that ball gag. Again, this is a bit nitpicky, but this little thing here, I don't understand how even had the strength to actually put that on Oh Father while he's screaming. Wouldn't it just like push forward? Who cares? Look, they need to kill him off. He's not like a super important character in the grand scheme of things. He's not like a Deep or Homelander. He gets introduced this season and is like, okay, we gotta kill him off now. So, you know, there we go. Oh Father, they just gotta find a way to kill him off, and that was it. It felt a bit kind of lazy. It's like, okay, this ball gag that just gets introduced this episode, that's gonna be how he dies. Whatever, I guess. Alright, this this is the big fight. This is everything that's been leading up to this. And I'm actually going to say this fight, I think, is okay. It's not great. I didn't love it, but I think like I was, you know, it was entertaining enough, I would say. Like, again, it's a disappointing that this stays in just this one room. We never leave. Like, Homelander, my guy, you could fly away. Honestly, you could have that super speed that you showed in the last episode and in this episode as well, where you killed fake Elon Musk. But no, I guess we're just gonna stay here. Yeah. Again, feels very contrived. Like, that's the most we get, is it's all contained in this one room. It really does show the budget. I think even season 1 had more impressive sort of like action. Like the opening of episode 1 in season 1, you had a whole like van being like crushed and whatnot. And here we're just kind of just in this one room. And then Homelander's like, Kimiko, what the fuck are you doing? Are you gonna blast? And of course they write this whole cheesy thing where Kimiko doesn't have the rage in her to actually blast Homelander. She doesn't feel it. I'm like, why, girl? Why? Like, this man killed your guy. He killed your man. And you're just gonna be like, I just don't feel that rage. Like, come on, Homelander is the worst person in the world. It's, again, it feels pretty forced to me, because I feel like Kimiko should be raging, but whatever, they want to have Frenchie come in as a force ghost. Hey, mon coeur, use the force. You know, that's what they want to do. They want this little cheesy scene. It's like, no, hate is not what you need. It's all about love, or, you know, whatever he says. Again, I do think Kimiko's really, like, the performance. Is it Karen Fukunaga, if that's her name? But yeah, I think her performance is really solid. But yeah, this is just a bit too cheesy for me to, like, fully land. But, whatever. I guess the point is, we have Homelander being depowered, and this, like what comes after, this I found very satisfying when he's trying to use his powers and they just do not work. I am a fan of all of that. It's like the first time we actually see Homelander in this position, and it was so satisfying. It was so gratifying to actually see Homelander be treated like a little bitch. Like when he's getting punched, it is, oh my god, easily the best part of the episode. And that's where I say, like, although I think this season as a whole has been a letdown, I do think like where it ended, where certain stories, character arcs landed, I'm pretty happy with. I'm pretty satisfied. It's more so just like how they got there is kind of the problem. It felt like there's, you know, quite a bit of padding, kind of just, you know, messing around. It's not always getting to the point. It doesn't have that momentum that earlier seasons had, like season 1 or even season 3. It does feel like, okay, why are we spending time on She-Line? Bloody She-Line! Sniffing, you know, whatever his name is, his ass. Like, why are we spending time on that? But when it gets to this stuff, when it actually matters, this was very satisfying, and Anthony Starr is terrific, and his death was satisfying for me, so all that worked. This was funny too, where Ashley's just like, oh yeah, I'm gonna stay, I'm gonna be the president, and then we get that little image of her where she gets impeached, and oh my god, it's so funny. So I like that. I like Ashley, honestly. I think she's a pretty solid character. She's always fun when we see her. All right, then we get Butcher. This part feels rushed to me, where of course Butcher is like, all right, Ryan, you're my bloody son, you know, let's go out and start a new life. And obviously this ain't gonna happen like that. This ain't no Disney movie. He's been an asshole to Ryan, so I kind of respect Ryan for being like, no, I'm gonna do my own thing. He's like Miles Morales, you know, I'm gonna do my own thing. But what I didn't like is what happens immediately after, where Butcher's dog Terror dies, and then immediately he's just like, well shit, now it's time to kill all Soup genocide, which I don't know, felt a bit sudden. Like, I know in the comics Butcher, you know, does the same thing. He tries to do his Soup genocide, but in the comics Butcher is way more evil than he is in the show, and I feel like in order to make this work, either they needed to make Butcher more evil throughout this whole season instead of making him feel like just kind of normal Butcher that we've had before, which obviously the end of season 4 was very much setting up for him to be a villain of sorts. So that to me, like, I could see Butcher wanting to do Soup genocide. Of course it makes sense for his character, and I think it's still like, it makes sense for him to do this, you know, at the end of this episode, but it's more so how quickly he wants to do it after Homelander dies. Because for a moment he's chill with, you know, he's like, oh Ryan, you know, how you doing? And then he's like, all right, Tara, my lovely dog. And then immediately when his dog dies, he's just like, well shit, Soup genocide, even though he's been low-key being chill for most of this season. I think on maybe he feels a bit more time, like it feels more of a time gap between Homelander dying and him wanting to do Soup genocide. If he actually could, like, I don't know, sat down with it, but it feels like immediately go from one beat to the next. There's not much like of a time gap between these two big moments. It's like immediately afterwards, he just decides, all right, time to kill all soups. It is a bit rushed, but I still think it makes sense for the character to go in that direction. And honestly, you could even argue that maybe Butcher, his heart wasn't really in on it, on the whole soup genocide thing, because honestly, he could have just like released the virus like any time. Like he's waiting for the soups to come by is what he says. That's why he hasn't done it. But I think he knew Huey was gonna be here, and maybe he wanted Huey to stop him, maybe deep down. I could definitely see that as a plausible explanation. But yeah, I really like this last scene between Huey and Butcher. I think it really works for their characters to end at this point. It would have worked better if they actually made Butcher a bit more evil in this season. But still, I think this is a satisfying way to end Butcher's character arc. It makes sense, even if it was a little rushed getting there. And I also like, Butcher honestly could have just killed Huey here if he really wanted to. But he has, of course, a soft spot for Huey. And of course, you know, Huey shoots him because he reminds him of Lenny. It's like, at last second, he's like, oh, maybe I won't push the button. Boom, he gets shot. And I think, honestly, he's kind of grateful to be shot. And he's just like, don't call an ambulance. It won't do no good. Even though I'm like, I don't know, maybe it could. You know, it didn't look like the bullet was like super fatal. But whatever. Butcher, he's down for the count. Rest in peace. What a legend. I will be sad that we no longer hear, oi, Huey, in any episodes. But yeah, rest in peace. What a goat. And yeah, he gets buried right next to Becca. Oh look, he's back with his wife. That's nice. And he basically adopts Ryan. He gets offered this job, Huey, to be part of this like soup task force. And he rejects it, which I think is not financially smart. Because my guy, you own a record store in 2026. That can't be making much money. Like I would have probably taken the FBI job or whatever, the government job, you know, for the more secure salary. But whatever, he decides to be Campbell Audiovisuals. Starlight's pregnant. They're still doing some superhero stuff. I thought this was a very satisfying way to end Huey's arc and Starlight. It's just nice. It's nice for a show that's been so dark, so grim, so nihilistic to actually have happy endings for some characters like Huey and Starlight. And they even, you know, do a callback to Robin as well with the baby name. So this all worked for me. Of course, you can't go wrong with Billy Joel as well, Piano Man. Maybe that's also maybe why I liked the ending a bit more, because I just like the song. And also we get a shout out to the crew, which I thought was really lovely, very nice, very sweet. But yeah, overall, there are parts of this episode that I think like the first, you know, before the White House stuff, it's like whatever. When we get to the White House, characters start dying, it's like, okay, it's actually, I think this is an enjoyable finale. A bit rushed, yes, for sure, it is definitely rushed, but still, like, it got to the places that I'm satisfied where they landed on. I'm happy with how Homelander's story ends, how Butcher's story ends, how Huey's story ends. So, you know what? It's a solid finale. It would have been better if they were able to like have this type of ending come in way before in like the end of season 3, if they could have reworked the soldier, because they're basically doing what they were going to do in season 3, but instead of Soldier Boy blasting Homelander, it's Kimiko. So it really felt like we just wasted kind of 2 seasons to get to where we could have gone to at the end of season 3, but whatever. It's, you know, it's alright. So top level thoughts on The Boys. I think this season finale, it's an enjoyable season finale. Not the best season finale, but it's definitely not as bad as something like a Stranger Things or Game of Thrones. And also as well, like when people compare this to Game of Thrones or Stranger Things, The Boys was never like a Game of Thrones tier like show. It was never had like the incredible writing that Game of Thrones had. So then, therefore, it didn't have the incredible like fall off that Game of Thrones had as well in its last 2 seasons. The Boys is like, the first season I think is definitely the best season. I'd probably give that like an 8 out of 10. Season 3 is my second favorite season, and even that's like a 7 out of 10. I'd give this season 5, probably a 6 out of 10. I still like, I'll admit, week to week, I was still looking forward to each new episode. You know, it's still something that I look forward to at every Wednesday. So it's not something where I'm like, oh, I can't be bothered watching this, which is very much how I felt when I watched Stranger Things season 5, where I'm like, I don't even want to watch these episodes. They're so long, and it's just nothing. It's a big nothing burger. Nothing happens. Here, sure, there was definitely some padding, some filler, but you know, I still enjoy. The performances are always S tier. So yeah, 6 out of 10, that's what I'm giving this. Alright, see ya.